Well, hello friends, I'm Rick.just. I'm the senior pastor of Asbury Church, and I'm grateful that you can join us here on YouTube to take a look at a few of the things that are going on in the life of the church. I come to you really as the president of the Great Plains Wesleyan Covenant Association, just to share with you some of the things that are going on in the life of the church. What you're going to be watching is really a recording of a church meeting we had here at Asbury, and it's really just pretty much the surface of what's going on around us. Many of you are fully aware, so this is not new. Some of you maybe never even have heard of the things that are going on in the life of our denomination, and ways that maybe we can actually come to a point to where we can be gracious about what looks to be a separation in the life of our denomination due to a variety of issues that are before us. But I just wanted to lift some of these things up to you today, and I would pray that you would just take a moment and reflect upon that, have the conversation. If you're a pastor, I encourage you to have the conversation with your church. If you've not begun that process, it's very important for you to do that, to begin that, because there's going to be a lot of persons saying, "Why didn't you tell me?" So really you need to begin that process to talk about what's going on in the life of our denomination. For those of you who are laity, it's really important that you express your views, your thoughts, your concerns, not only with your pastor, but even maybe with your DS, and even pass it on to the bishop. The voice really is with you as the laity. So we encourage you to share some of your concerns with what's going on with those in leadership. One of the things I want to just reference quickly, I'm going to talk about kind of how we got to where we're at, and a little bit of where we are, and prayerfully where we're going in the YouTube that's coming up here. But I'm referencing something called the protocol, which is really, it's really an opportunity for us to graciously separate in a way that we could shake hands and say, you know what, we're not going to come to agreement on some of these things that are before us. And so we want to bless you, we want to shake hands and have a Paul and Barnabas moment of moving on so that ministry can occur. We don't want to get in each other's way. We've been doing that too long. We can't continue this. It's an embarrassment to the world that watches. And so really this protocol is for that of separation that's ahead of us. So when you hear that word, that's 16 persons that came together, laity and clergy from across the world, led by a Jewish mediator to guide us through it, which is just amazing to me. And so this occurred some time ago now, really. And so we find ourselves here wanting to get this passed at General Conference being pushed to 2022. But you're going to hear about that. That's what the protocol is about. Churches, you're going to have to pay attention to this. Pastors, you're going to have to pay attention to this, because there's going to come a time to where you're going to have to make a decision about where you're going to land. Annual conferences are going to make decisions about where they're going to land. So be listening for that. And then really lastly, as we move into this, is I want to emphasize this. This is not, I want you to hear me, this is not about being anti-gay. Anti-gay, anti-lesbian, anti-LGBTQ. It just merely means that we differ on what Scripture has to say with regards to sexuality, sexual ethics, etc., those types of things. We're going to own that. We're going to own that. But it's not about hating others. It's not about anything like that. There is a disagreement on our understanding of what Scripture has to say about this, and then how we live that out. That's where we find ourselves. So you can hear about that a little bit in this YouTube as well. So really, if you have questions, you can give me a holler here at the church where I'm at, Asbury Church, 316-942-1491, or you can email me at rick.just@asburychurch.org, and I'll attempt to get back with you. Not saying I have all the answers by any means, only Jesus does, and that's why we seek to fix our eyes on Him. So I encourage you to do that as we move forward. Hey, thanks for listening, and please take a few minutes to watch this next, 50 minutes or so, if you will. Thanks so much.
Well, good morning. It's good. I've seen some of you for the last hour and a half or so for the first service. Some of you are prepping for the second service here after a bit. Some of you are on the other side of the screen, and we're grateful for that. Now, you're saying, wait a second, I thought you weren't live streaming this. We're not. We are recording it to our live stream, but it is not being live streamed as we speak, and it will be shown via YouTube. So those of you who are going to be watching on the YouTube, I want you to know that this particular meeting has all the transferable concepts for wherever you may happen to be. I just happen to be sharing it with Asbury Church. And so there'll be a few times when I might speak specifically to Asbury here today, but the bulk of this is across the board with what's going on that any of you on the other side can use, and feel free to share that YouTube or reference people to the YouTube in the churches that you're at. That would be just fine. I was just in Buckland, Jordan McFall and I in Buckland Thursday night, and I shared a lot of this. So there's so much we could talk about, and we only have a little bit of time, but I want to open with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. So Lord, we come before you now, and it's kind of a crazy shift of gears as we've moved from the 8 o'clock service with regards to the coming of the Holy Spirit and Pentecost and so forth, and moving into a church meeting. And yet, Lord, we need your Spirit more now than ever in this meeting. So we pray that your Spirit would fall on us even here in the midst of this time. So guide us and direct us and be present with us, we pray now in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I may sit down a little bit because I've been on my feet like a whole bunch lately, and will be yet for a little while today. But I just want to begin by thanking you for coming out, those of you here at Asbury, those of you who'll be watching, appreciate that very much. And I think what that does is just really shows a great care about what's going on in the life of the church, and specifically in the life of the denomination. It's no secret that we have some issues that are before us. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of this, for you Asburyans, is a little bit of, we're revisiting just a little bit of this, but I think we need to set the table a little bit to where we are today. So I want to share some things with you today and challenge you, encourage you through all of this, and we'll work through this together. Those of you who are watching, again, you may do the same thing, and if you want, any of you, I can get you a copy of the PowerPoint. I chose not to do that here because a lot of times you're looking at that, and some of you have already heard some of this, and I thought I don't want to kill 20 trees just for the PowerPoint, but I'm happy to get that as a, send it as a link, and you can just bring it up for yourself. That might be easier if you let me know, so we can do that. But I did give you a handout later on that I'll reference. And again, those of you on the other side of the screen can have this too. It's just has various places you can go for resources, and that are very, very helpful with regards to what's going on right now in the life of the church. Now, I am no authority, if you will, in the sense of knowing all that's happening and all that we need to do, but I'll try and give it the best college try I can in light of some of my role that I play in the Wesleyan Covenant Association, and in light of the role that I've played over the years in the annual conference for renewal and revitalization and so forth within the life of the church. So I want to go to this next slide, and Michael's going to go back and forth between the slides and myself, so you're not just only looking at the slide, especially if you're on the other side. But Wesley said this when he wrote Thoughts About Methodism, or Thoughts Upon Methodism, he said this, you've heard this: I am not afraid that the people called Methodists should ever cease to exist either in Europe or America, but I am afraid lest they should only exist as a dead sect, having the form of religion without the power. And this undoubtedly will be the case unless they hold fast both the doctrine, spirit, and discipline with which they first set out. Now, friends, that is so pertinent for us today, isn't it? So pertinent. I mean, Wesley had a fear that people would wander and stray. And here we find ourselves living out that fear that he had. And so I want to address a little bit of this today and talk about the things that are happening. So a question comes up on this next slide. It says, where are we? Where are we? So if you take a look at this sign, we have the past. And there's some incredible things, and those of you in 10:30 service, you're going to hear a little bit of our past towards the end of the sermon about Methodism and so forth. But we have a wonderful past, but it also is past. We're in the present, and all that's going on right now in the present. And then, of course, the future. What's that look like? What's that even mean? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What all does that mean? So, yeah, that's where we're at. So if you'll switch back to me so I can talk to them just a little bit more. There you go. That's what we're going to talk about. You know, I don't want to dwell on the past because the past is past, but we do have to reference it a little bit. We are dealing with what's happening right now in the life of the church, which is all sorts of things, which I'll talk about. And then I want to talk about some of the things for the future. So this first slide here, and I said this before, there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing. I want you to know that. So when people get all worked up about stuff that's happening in the life of the church, whoa, hold your horses. This has been happening forever, since the early church. It's gone through struggles before. In Acts 15, if you recall, you know, Paul came back and they had a church meeting like we're doing today. And they had some issues that they were able to work out. In Paul's writings, 1 Corinthians especially, wow, you talk about a messed up church. Mercy. I mean, capital M for mess. You talk about Paul's writings other places. You talk about James and the arguments between faith and works. And you talk about Jude. And Jude says, you know, I was going to write this, but I had noticed some things, so I'm going to write this so that we might contend for the faith that was once for all entrusted to the saints. And so, guess what? We're in good company. Okay? Are you with me on that? We're in good company. So, yeah, pull me off there. Just put that slide up a little bit and then put me on so I can, you know, they'll get it. I just don't want them to all look at a slide forever and ever. Not that they need to look at me necessarily, but it makes sense. But so we are in good company with all the things that are going on, lots of struggles and all that's happening. So we have an oxymoron that we're facing these days. It's called this: United Methodism. We are far from united. The United Methodist Church is far from united. We're arguing over things like the uniqueness of Christ, these things that are core doctrines, the lordship of Jesus, the authority of Scripture, the rejection of the faith that's been once entrusted to the saints of the church, the relationship of culture to the church, holiness of heart and mind. All of these things, it's crazy that we're arguing about these things. These are the core things in the life of the church, friends. These are the things that are the non-negotiables. There are some things that are negotiable. There are some things that are peripheral. There are things that are out there, and that's why we have some different denominations, because they've kind of looked at things a little bit different. You know, we have those that are going to lift up the sovereignty of God. Well, we do that too, but the Presbyterians really do that. And so you're going to have, that's where their emphasis is going to be, the emphasis. We're going to emphasize grace, not cheap grace, we've gone there, but grace and Methodism. In the more Assembly of God church and so forth, they're going to lift up the role of the Holy Spirit. All of these, we need all of these. These are like golf clubs in a golf bag. We need all the clubs if we're going to play the game. So I just want you to realize that, but the things that the golf clubs matter. What's in the bag matters. And all of these things that we are struggling with these days. And so, you know, those from the more progressive side will say, well, we believe in the authority of Scripture, as we do, but we both see that way differently when we talk about authority of Scripture. And what does that mean? And do we talk about all of Scripture, or do we talk about the portion that we believe is authoritative? How do we side? On and on we go. So we've had these issues. This has come about, and Kip, you've been around a long time, brother. You've seen how this stuff is played out. But he's a retired pastor. But, you know, in 68, when the church came into being, really, we started off on the wrong foot already with the whole understanding of theological pluralism, meaning that all the streams kind of led into the same river. And so all of these things, everything was being accepted, especially if you just were deemed sincere and so forth. Well, you can be sincerely wrong. And so, I mean, all of these things, and we've been going down this road since 1968, on and on and on and on. But really the presenting issue, as you know, is this. It's that of sexuality. Okay? Sexuality. And my goodness, do we have conversation over this? What we have is, it's really the symptom of the problems that I've just mentioned before, of these things that are really the core of the faith and what Scripture has to say and so forth. When we talk about sexuality, we're talking about a symptom of the brokenness and divisiveness that's coming as a result of all of this that's taking place. So we're talking about sexual ethics. How does one act with regards to sexuality? We're talking about marriage. What do we believe about marriage? I'm just going to say we believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. We believe that's a biblical understanding of marriage. We know not everybody believes that. We don't want to throw rocks at people. We don't want to be ugly and so forth, but this is what we believe. And we believe Scripture has something to say about every one of these things. Ordination, if we're going to talk about ordination and laying hands on someone and the call of God upon someone's life, then what does that mean? What does that mean? Are they willing to follow God through Jesus Christ? Do we believe in Jesus' divinity? Do we believe in the Holy Spirit? Do we believe in His holy word? If we're ordaining people into another belief, then that's part of our problem when we're dealing with this particular issue. So, we've been struggling with this for years and years and years. And it's been getting worse every General Conference. General Conference is the official voice of the church. It meets as a gathering, worldwide gathering. Not quite yet. Let me just say a few words before you put that screen up. Thanks. It meets every 4 years, and boy, these last few times have been just terrible. I was in Tampa Bay in 2012. I was in Portland in 2016. Just continued to get worse. And what happened then was there was just no agreement that was taking place on the conference floor. So it was deemed necessary that we would call a special general conference, not meaning me, the Council on Bishops. And so now if you'll go to the next slide. In 2019, if you recall, I went to St. Louis, as did other delegates from across the globe representing our particular annual conferences. That was to be the general conference that made the decision regarding sexuality, okay? To decide, and that we would then say, okay, we are going to abide by this, this is where we are. They met to make a decision. The very first day, there was a day set aside for prayer, praying for the Lord to guide and lead. The next day was the conversation, and a vote came, and it was even a little bit stronger to the traditional understanding of marriage, sexual ethics, ordination, those types of things. And the accusation was, we heard it wrong. That's not the Lord's will. And so, incredible, embarrassing arguments, temper tantrums, yelling, screaming, accusations, finger pointing, you name it, happened on the floor of General Conference. It was absolutely awful. The air was thick. When the decision came down, it was eerie silence. There was no celebrating anywhere. People didn't know what to do. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. And as a result, then chaos has ensued. And the question that comes is, what good is the discipline if it's not enforced? That's the question I get all the time. Anybody get that? If you're a parent, what good are, if you're going to give these rules, pull it off that slide if you will. What good are these rules if we lay them down and then we don't hold to them with our kids? Guess what they're going to do? They're going to push you. So that's what's happened. And so we have some problems. Since 2019, when the decision was made, the decision wasn't enforced. And when you don't enforce the decision, you have chaos. And we are living now under the umbrella of chaos. It's been disastrous. We know that. Now, I mentioned this last time. We had a church meeting, I believe, in February of 2020. And I mentioned this in Isaiah 43:19. God is doing a new thing. Remember that? Now, new things take time. New things take time. And the tendency is we get ahead of God. Anybody? Anybody ever been there? So we get ahead of God. God is doing a new thing. It springs up before you. Do you not perceive it? Our problem is, I think, we desire to perceive it, but we're looking for it to happen in a way that we think it ought to happen. And so when God's doing something in accordance to the way God desires to do something, we don't always see it. And so I firmly believe that God is doing a new thing. He is raising up the people of God. But it's not going to be easy street. All right? And we can tend to get ahead of God. General Conference 2019 revealed our brokenness. So, something had to happen. We could not continue down this road. And we cannot continue down this road. We know that. And thus something called the protocol came about. Anybody heard that word? Is this new to anybody, the protocol? I'm just curious. Everybody here has heard of the protocol? No, some of you haven't. Okay, that's why we're doing this. Okay, it's very important that we understand something called the protocol. So, bring up that slide. You missed that. There you go. The protocol of reconciliation and grace through separation. Now, that sounds really weird, doesn't it? Think about that. Doesn't sound like that they fit together. But in December of 2019, there was a group that came together because they saw, it was just, this thing's running amok. We're going crazy. It's disastrous. We need to do better. Surely the church can work through conflict and come out acting like the church somewhere along the way. And so this team was made up of worldwide members of the United Methodist Church, 16 clergy and laity, to come up with a plan. They were made up of those who would have been what we would call progressive. Language changes. Used to be called liberal, now called progressive. I may go back and forth, but that's what we're talking. Those in the middle called centrists, and those on the conservative side now called traditionalists, more so in language. All of these groups, clergy and laity, coming together, having the conversation. Now, here's the really, really, really important thing that's so interesting to me. This meeting was mediated by a Jewish attorney. A Jewish attorney. Do we not know of a Jewish man who mediated a way between us and the Father somewhere along the way? Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Well, this guy's named Feinberg. The other one is named Jesus. All right? So this is a Jewish attorney who, on his own, no cost to anyone, said, I will help guide you through this. I will help you with the conversation. And so they sat down and they hammered it out, and they worked it out, something called the protocol of reconciliation and grace through separation. And the intent, I love intentions, but the intent was that in May of 2020, when General Conference was going to occur, that this would be the first thing on the docket, and that the conference, that the delegates could vote on it, and at that point begin to make the moves forward for all sides involved. You can see, you can go to wesleyancovenant.org and you'll find all the information you want about any and all of this and more. Okay? And I gave you a handout that has some of these resources. So, here we are, that the protocol, it's agreed upon principle by all parties. The intent was that we, until General Conference would occur, we would live by the spirit of the protocol. It's not working out so well. Live by the spirit of the protocol. In other words, there would not be complaints filed. There would not be same-sex marriages. That people would hold off for a moment on moving forward, whatever camp you found yourself in, to let things settle out, that General Conference would occur, the vote would take place, and we could move forward. Because all parties were in favor, were affirming the protocol. So it was the momentum was there, it was building, and the WCA was an integral part of that. There were some who were from the traditional camp who were still holding back a little bit leery, a little bit skeptical. Hey, what's going on? And all of this. Several of them came together in a meeting in Atlanta in February of 2020. And as they came together, they were the ones then that ultimately were the brain thrust behind what I'm going to reference after a bit, the new denomination. Okay, so General Conference scheduled for 2020. Happy, happy, happy. Praise the Lord. We think we're going to get there. It looked promising. And then something happened. What was it? COVID. COVID. So as you know, everything came to a halt. Everything came to a halt. Things stopped. Everywhere. We're not just talking General Conference. We're talking across the board. Everywhere. Things came to a halt. So the decision was then made, because they knew there was no way There was no way. The Commission on General Conference saw there was no way that we could have General Conference in May of 2020. If you recall, March, April, May, that was hotbed time of COVID. So they postponed it to August of 2020. August of 2021, I'm sorry, to August of 21. In between, there were some in-person meetings. I mean, there were no in-person meetings. There were just Zoom meetings. Anybody tired of Zoom by now? Kind of zoomed out, but the reality is it's not a bad thing. We're able to do some good things with it, virtually. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the WCA was working hard to create the Book of Doctrine and Discipline. That has they have done that. The draft is there. Ministry task forces taking place, coming together to work to set, to already go before us that we'd be ready to go when this was voted on. Laying the foundation of the new denomination. The problem is, we've gone through all this time. We've not had any real conversation in person. We've had phone calls, we've had emails, we've had texts, we've had Zoom meetings, on and on and on we go. COVID did not go away. And so in May of this last year, where are we? May in 2020, all of a sudden, no, it was going to, I'm all confused. The upcoming General Conference that was going to be in 2021 was deemed that it could not happen. The Council on General Conference, the Commission on General Conference, looked at Africa, Eastern Europe, all these places, said they're not even opening. You can't even get on a plane, on and on and on, and we just can't do it. So it was postponed again to August of 2022. That's a year from this August. The same day of this announcement, this happened, I think it was March 1. March 1, that's when it was. March 1, the Council of Bishops chose to say, oh, by the way, we're going to have a virtual general conference just to address 11 issues that we need to take care of that deal with some budget and some issues of making sure we have leadership in certain parts of the country and the world. Now, wait a second. The Commission just said we can't have a general conference. In fact, they just said we can't have a virtual general conference because of all the issues that go into play. And the Council of Bishops now say we're going to have a general conference. Oh, but we're just going to do it with paper ballots. How's that worked out the last few years? Doesn't matter where you're talking. But in the life of the church, even so. And so, huge backlash. Huge backlash. Their specially called May General Conference was canceled under the umbrella of great prayer and discernment, thinking we probably should move this. And so, the same day, everybody doing all right? I don't want to bore you to tears, but I got to tell you. The same day, the new denomination was announced. Now, the denomination was going to be announced a week or two beforehand, but because of they were waiting, meaning the new denomination at WCA, etc., they were waiting for the council on the conference, Commission on General Conference to announce whether they were going to have it or not. So they were waiting. They didn't want to get in the way of that. And it all falls on the same day. And so at 6 in the morning, on March the 1st, the announcement of the new denomination called the Global Methodist Church. www.globalmethodist.org. You can go on their website. You can see that this thing is ready to rock. It's ready to roll. It is not officially launched because the wait is upon the protocol being passed. There is what's called a transitional book of doctrine and disciplines. The WCA put together a book of doctrine and discipline. It had been then tweaked to move into that's what we're calling the transitional book of doctrine and discipline to move us into the new denomination. And once the protocol is passed, the new denomination will occur. It's led by the Transitional Leadership Council until the convening conference. Let's just say right now that August of 2022, that protocol passes. It would probably be 12 to 18 months before the convening conference of the new denomination. However, you would move into that already under what's called transitional leadership. So there would not be a wait longer. Now, our church, as you know, and those of you on the other side of the screen, I don't know where you're at, But our church, we've had enough conversation to know that we're ready to go when the time comes. We've had multiple church meetings. We've talked about these things. Some of you out there on the other side haven't had any, and you really, really need to have that conversation. It's important so you don't surprise your people. So these are the things that are happening. Now, I just want to do a little side note here. I know people have been a little nervous about the name, Global Methodist Church. One, global. Well, going to all the world sounds global to me, and make disciples. So we're not going to get caught up in the political or even end times understanding of the global piece. So we're talking about what our calling is to go to all the world to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Methodist, I realize Methodist has taken a negative connotation for many people, but that's mostly church people. It's very rare that the unchurched know anything going on with the church issues out there. And so if we're going to be truly Methodist, and you'll hear it in the next sermon, you'll hear what that's about. We'll hear what we're really about, and we won't have anything to apologize about. It'll just open up a door for us to have conversation. So we'll just leave it at that. You can agree or not agree with it, but that's the name. Okay? So, now I have a whole PowerPoint that I'm not even touching today, but that goes and explains the Global Methodist Church and some of the differences there. Chris Ritter does an incredible job. Also, if you get on your paper, it says people need Jesus. There's a chart that he just put together that compares the church that will remain and the new denomination. You can see a comparison chart. I can get those things to you. I wasn't going to waste a whole lot of paper right now. You can let us know, and we can put links on our website or whatever, and you can get a hold of that. All right? So, I've used this word before. We live in the tween. Remember last week? We live in the tween. There is much dysfunction out there. Lots of dysfunction. We have heavy-handedness, finger-pointed. Anybody's read anything about what's going on in United Methodist Church knows that bishops are being heavy-handed. They're bullying some of their more traditional pastors out of large churches to remove them so they can set it up better for where they stand on their theology and so forth. It's happening in the life of Korean pastors. It happened down at Mount Bethel in North Georgia. We have a pastor that came out of our own annual conference in Missouri who ended up turning in his credentials last week with what I believe to be some bullying from the upper echelon. And a variety of things. So a lot of this is going on. I had I'm on an app with a variety of people across the country, and overnight, yesterday and today, there's political messes going on in annual conferences. Our annual conference meets this week, by the way, virtually. Joy and rapture over that. But who wants to do that? So there's some real finagling going on by leaders in our annual conferences to tweak and I'm concerned because here's what happens on a virtual annual conference. The bishop will see who's in the queue. The bishop will see whether the person is in favor or opposed or wants to call the question or any of those kind of things. Well, I know how we are. If the bishop doesn't want this person to talk, I didn't see that person in the queue, and therefore this person will talk. And if the bishop doesn't want the question called so that we can have continuous discussion, you can overlook that. And that's just where we're at. Please don't say I'm saying that about bishop signs. I'm just saying this is what can happen in a larger context of the virtual way of doing annual conference. So many bishops, there's all sorts of things I could go into here, but many bishops are dragging their feet. Many bishops are working hard to see that they're positioned, and I believe Bishop Signs is helping in that area, to see that churches are positioned with pastors, etc. Many are dragging their feet, looking the other way, and many are working really hard in the appointive system to remove the people they don't want. And so we have those things on. There are various approaches by the bishops. And here's what I say. We're in this mess because bishops have not bished. Bishops need to bish. Bishops are overseers. Bishops are the ones to see that we hold fast to the doctrine, to the Spirit, to that which is there, to that which we've agreed upon. That's what they said when they took the oath, when they were assigned as bishop. That's what they said they would do. But when bishops don't do that, this is where we find ourselves. And then thus the people do what is right in their own eyes. It's biblical. Look what happened in the Old Testament. And so here we are. So in the meantime, I'm very, very grateful for the WCA. I know not everybody's really happy about the WCA. It all depends where you land. But I've told you this before in 2016 when I signed it as a charter member of this, that I wanted to be a part of a movement. And I know, when you start getting into this kind of stuff, that doesn't look like a movement. It looks like paperwork. Somebody still has to do the work. I mean, things like this, So WCA has acted as a midwife, all right? Never did the WCA want to be a new denomination. Their role was to bring revitalization, revival, and renewal into the life of the church. That was the desire of the WCA. Should that not occur, they would provide a way to take people forward so that we could be the church we're called to be. And so that's what's been happening all these years up to this point. Each year we have something called the Legislative Assembly and the Global Gathering. How many of you attended the Global Gathering here? Some of you? Yeah. And if you could watch it at home, you can still go back and watch all those speakers. Incredible. Those of you on the other side of the screen, I want you to know, all of that is available on the WCA website. You can just go to Global Gathering. You can bring up all those speakers. You can read about all the things that we talked about in the Legislative Assembly. The Legislative Assembly is purely the business part of the WCA to move us and prepare us for what is coming. Where's Susan at? There she is. Susan went as a delegate, and Carolyn Jansen went as a delegate. She's out of town, I believe. But they're from our church, from the local body here, as well as 5 other persons went. And we sat in on that. And there were 6 resolutions that were addressed that day. First of all, before we got to that, I want you to know that there was an endorsement by the WCA of the protocol. Because of COVID, we were not able to meet last year, and so this year came together. Great endorsement of the protocol. We believe this is the best way for all parties, okay? There is also an affirming of the announcement of the Global Methodist Church. By far, virtually consensus on that with regards to the new church. And then there was, thirdly, the condemned appointments that separated theologically conservative pastors from their theologically conservative constituency. In other words, bishops who are bullying. Strong language of condemning that. There was also some incredible work that's gone on behind the scenes of task forces. One for discipleship. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. This new denomination is not for wimps. So if you think you're going to skate, we're talking serious business here. We're talking people who are serious for the Lord, and the bar is high. If you want the low bar, you just stay where we are. But you want a high bar of ministry and what's there for you, and accountability and expectations and so forth, let it be known that discipleship is expected, that we are about making disciples of Jesus Christ. So there was a resolution passed for that. There was a resolution passed for church multiplication. The expectation is that churches will plant churches, no matter the size. It can be a home church planting a home church. But the bottom line, expectation that we will be about the business of the church. Church revitalization. Some of us are even working on a pilot project right now. We had a prayer group who met on Monday nights for 12 weeks, 7 or 8 from the church who did that. I was part of a clergy covenant group. I am currently part in phase 2 of the discipleship piece, as is Susan, and we're going, wow. We have some work to do, but it's really good stuff. And there's a whole piece for lay people. I need some people who are interested, who are laity, who would be willing to be a part of a lay-led group, because I've got the material for you. You just need to talk to me about it. And so that's out before us. Revitalization, youth and young adult task force, working in ways to reach the younger crowd, the nuns, those who are the younger folks out there. And then we had a couple. The morning session took us a little while because we still have some Methodist DNA in us, which means people like to talk at the microphone. But you got to understand, and I was telling Susan this too, we got to understand that in so many places they've never been given the opportunity because of the thumb that's been placed upon them. And so there was not arguing, there was not conflict. It was just that, here's my heart regarding discipleship. Here's my heart regarding church multiplication. And sometimes we got hung up on a word that we didn't need to get hung up on, that they'll work that out at the convening conference and so forth. I just need to share this with you because, me, I'm kind of going, we need to keep moving. So I got up to the microphone and Keith said, yeah, Rick. And so I said, well, I just had a question, Keith. I just want to make sure with you and Carolyn Moore that I'm clear on this. So I just want to make sure that what we're doing here today is purely an understanding of passing what we call a resolution. In other words, there is nothing legislative about it. We cannot act upon it officially until the convening conference. We are just working on this to present this to the convening conference, and they therefore will take it and approve it or massage it or whatever. I said, the main reason I'm asking this is that I have a plane ticket Sunday morning, and I just want to make sure I get on, So people were with me on that one. So anyways, we were able to move through it. We have a couple more things on June the what, Susan, 15th? June 15th, we have two more of the task forces that we need to take a look at. They are the Ministry with Marginalized Peoples and the Global Missional Partnership Task Force. We ran out of time. The church we were under a timeline, and so we will do that virtually on June the 15th. So we just want you to be aware. So good things. The WCA is doing great things, working behind the scenes, along with some of the caucuses that are out there and a variety of the groups that are out there. And know this as well. The centrist and progressive groups are working. There's some that are working in areas that I would not want to go that direction, but some of them are working in such a way to see that we can have a gracious exit. Why not be the church that says, we want to bless you, it's a Paul and Barnabas moment, and we're going to go our ways, and that way it won't be ugly. The last thing we want to do is to get into a bunch of legal stuff and fighting and arguing and all that kind of stuff. So I think we can do it. We just got to get there. So pray for all involved. So as I said, we're acting as a midwife. If you'd put that slide back up again, we're talking about a baby being born, okay? A movement is being birthed. Ladies, labor pains. Would you like to share? No. But we know about labor pains. When you're having a baby, there are some labor pains. You don't get pregnant one day and have the baby the next. I know you wish that could happen, but it's not the way it works. It takes some time. And through that gestation period, through that time period, there's all sorts of things that are happening. Morning sickness, right? Sometimes you end up barfing. I'm just going to say it. Sometimes in the midst of all this church junk, I want to barf. We find ourselves in the midst of this. And here we are. Even Keith Boyette talked about even like a point of a C-section. People want to jump on that, right? But this is where we're at. And we find ourselves in this very important moment in the life of the church. And people say, well, I don't want to wait. Well, can't we just disaffiliate? Well, let me talk to you about disaffiliation for just a second. You can pull that slide. Thanks. Disaffiliation, what that means is at General Conference of 2019, there's something called paragraph 2553 that basically was approved. If a church wanted to leave, they could leave based upon a particular formula and last year and 2 years worth of apportionments. In other words, the year before and the year following. Apportionments are those monies that go to support the church ministries, the generalized church ministries, both on the larger context as well as the local context. And so that would have to occur with a with a charge conference. There'd have to be a 57% vote. It's a strange vote, but there was a compromise in the life of the church. It'd have to be approved by the annual conference, which would happen once the church approved it. But the approval would include the cost of the disaffiliation. It is prohibitive. For Asbury, right now, the disaffiliation cost is $650,000. Now, unless you're rich and want to come talk to me afterwards, $650,000 is on a different tree than the ones I grow in my backyard. And so that's a lot of money, especially to pay for something that we already have bought. And so that makes no sense if we're going to be good stewards with what it is that the Lord has given us. So I want us to be really careful about saying, well, let's just disaffiliate because so-and-so church did it over here, so-and-so church did it over here. We need to be really careful about that. We need to be prayed through. And there are a couple other options out there, but they're just as time-consuming as this, and so we might as well go with the one that's time-consuming, that is the least evasive, if you will, that allows us then to leave with the trust clause is released, meaning you keep your building, keep your assets, all those kind of things. It means you would have to pay your back apportionment, but that would be the last apportionment, I believe, that you'd have to pay. So, and then you would be able to move forward into the new denomination later on through the protocol. So I just want to say this about our bishop and our cabinet, because we're about to wrap it up, and this will work good with a few questions. And those of you on the other side of the screen, there's a lot more that I would normally say if I was visiting you, but Asbury's heard much of this, and so I'm not going to just milk that thing. I'm not going to get into the weeds, and if you want us to talk about that, give me a holler. But Bishop Sines and the cabinet, Mitch Reese is our district superintendent. There are many annual conferences who are removing their pastors for meetings like this. There are many annual conferences where the bishop is bullying his or her way around. You've read about some of that. We do not have that happening in our annual conference. And so, I may not agree with everything Bishop Sines does. I mean, who agrees with everybody anyways? But the reality is, way back when, even when, if you remember the separation, when the West Campus left and Bishop Sines was in my office, and we were sitting there talking, and we say, we're positioning ourselves for what we know is going to happen. So let's not get in the way of each other. And so in reality, I've been playing somewhat of the DS role still, even though I'm not, to help talk to Mitch and say, well, that's a curious move. Do you realize where this person lands? Or what do you think about this? I mean, just to, I've had different district superintendents call me and ask for explanation about some of these things that are happening on the WCA side. So if I can work alongside them and they alongside me, and we not be beating each other up, then that makes the most sense to me. It just seems to make sense. And we can go ahead and be an example to other annual conferences then that are going through this, because it's messy out there. And I've had several people who have been coming to me and saying, "Are they going to yank you?" I said, well, no, they're not. So don't worry about that. And so we'll just keep plugging along. Last slide here. Last week I talked about waiting in Jerusalem. So here we are. We're waiting in Jerusalem until we are clothed with power from on high. We cannot move forward on our own power lest we fall flat on our faces. And I want to say this, and so don't take offense, but I want to say this. We are not yet ready to move. We're not ready. We're not prayed up enough. We're not geared up enough. We haven't visioned enough. We haven't communicated well enough with each other yet. We are not clothed with power on high to make a move today. We are not there. We are closer, Asbury, than most churches out there that I go visit who've not even had the conversation. And they're the ones who are saying, well, let's leave, let's leave. I say, well, how can you leave? You don't even know what you're talking about. You haven't even had the conversation. I mean, where are you going to leave? Where to? How are you going to do it? We have got to be prayed up. I mean, how much time have you honestly prayed about this? Before the Lord, prayed about this and asked God for His guidance, His wisdom, His discernment, and for the leadership of the church here, and for what we do. Yeah, we could say, let's go, but where are we going to go and how are we going to do it? And then my question is, okay, so we have a new name, so we have a new sign. What difference does that make to you in your ministry? Are you going to do something different tomorrow if it's a new name versus what you do today? Are you going to go to someone's house and talk to them about Jesus? What are you going to do different because of the name than you're doing different today? So we need to address those things first. I believe the time is coming, and it may come before August of 2022, because there's things happening behind the scenes, friends. There's other things that are happening. But we're just going to have to stick with it. We have plenty of ministry to do. We know by the garage sale that a lot of people don't know Jesus yet. So we can be Jesus to them. We can share the gospel. We can do it. We can even use words. So how we act, what we say matters. We have work to do. So don't get distracted. The Great Commission is before us. Therefore go, making disciples. Be empowered from on high. The Great Commandment is before us, to love God and neighbor. That's kind of hard to do when you're in conflict. Most of all, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. So friends, that's kind of where we're at today. And that's the latest update with all sorts of things going on behind the scenes. But that's where we're at. So I'm gonna stop there and see if any of you have any questions. Those of you who are going to be watching on YouTube, if you have questions, you can email me at Rick.just at asburychurch.org. Rick.just at asburychurch.org, and I'll do the best I can to either answer or send you to someone who can answer the best we can. But I think we're going to stop for the recording piece of this, Michael, and then I'll just open it up here for the family. Okay? So thanks for joining us. See you on the other side.